you use something called a tone row, in which you take all the 12 notes or 12 tones of sort of Western European music, and you divide these randomly, or you could use an algorithm, I suppose, to divide them into 4 3-note sections. And then we can assign each one of those notes a number so we understand the relative relation of the notes. That's about as much as I currently understand, and I understand you used one of Webern's tone rows for the compositions. That's the one starting on B natural?
Yes.
Yeah, so
So it's the tone row from the Concerto for 9 Instruments.
mhm.
So Scott Tunis, who played in Frank Zappa's bands throughout the 80s, he was telling me about how he wished the piece was longer, and how he tried to get one of his bandmates he tried to commission a piece from his bandmates to make a longer version of the Webern piece. But they didn't do it because they were too busy playing cribbage with Mike Keneally on the bus.
No.
So, and I saw this email, and I'm like, that's so funny. And I was like, huh. So I was like, I could take the rules of cribbage and smash it into Webern and then kind of see what comes out. And I laughed a lot. And when I laugh a lot, usually means I should do something about it. So I wrote out the tone row matrix. So one thing I want to explain about your explanation is you can choose any 12 notes as long as they don't repeat. Right? So you don't have to generate it algorithmically. You can just decide, I like these 12 notes in this order. And then you can build a matrix. So the first P0 would be the prime 0 row, would be the tone row unadorned.
Okay,
and then P1 would be that
can
same
you tell us
tone
what those
row
notes are, Chris?
Sorry, what?
Can you tell us what those notes are? So our first row, can you tell us what those notes are?
Sure. Offhand, I have to look it up.
Oh, okay. I have it here. All right, I'll say it. So we have B natural, B flat, D. That's our first group of 3. Then we have E flat, G, F sharp. Then we have A flat, E natural, F natural. Then we have C natural, C sharp, A.
Perfect.
Now, quick question on that. How do we determine which notes are getting sharps or flats? Like, is there a particular reason why we choose one enharmonic equivalent over another?
For me, how do I explain this? In terms of populating the matrix, I just chose whichever ones were the most common. So B flat is much more common than A sharp. But throughout writing the piece, there might be times when A sharp is more appropriate depending on the general key of the thing. So one of the big delusions about 12-tone music is that you cannot generate tonal sounding music, and that actually is not true. You can build chord progressions. You just have to have 12 of the same chord, which kind of happens a lot. So like in the last one of the show, it's still the matrix is still operating, but it sounds so tonal because I'm using, I think it's sharp 11, add 9, add 13 chords. But I have a whole chord progression of them. Does that make sense? So they're moving in the same kind of bum, 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 but they're moving chordally, not as individual pitches.
So you're taking that chord and then you're moving it with the root following the tone row.
Right, or changing the inversions too. If you have a chord that thick, you can imply different chords by changing the inversions. But there's nothing that prevents you from writing considerably. I mean, the chord progression will be a little out there, but doesn't stop you from writing tonal music. And then in the middle of the piece, when there's that kind of Stravinsky section, I freeze the row. So I'm using 2 very specific scales that are generated from the tone row, but they're generated from that same chord that I used from the prior parts. Another thing too is you can use these ideas. You can make, for instance, a 7-note matrix and just pick C, D, E, F, G, A, B and generate music from that. As long as it says you can't, nothing says have to be 12 tones. Nothing that says that, you know what I'm saying? You can use these techniques to make fundamentally different types of music than the kind of music Schoenberg was making. Like their goal was chromatic saturation, right? So they're trying to sound as many of the notes of the chromatic scale at once to make music no one's heard before. But you can apply his same methodologies and make music that is not chromatically saturated.
Fascinating. So as opposed to using all 12 notes, you just use 7 notes of the diatonic major scale.
You could choose that. And the
Yeah.
cribbage variations, they're all 12. They're all very strictly 12 tone. I wanted to be strict because I found it frustrating when composers would cheat. They would say like, "Oh, my process, I should have a G sharp here, but I'm gonna be the director and say I'm gonna use an A instead." I refuse to do that. I was like, "No, you will find every single tone row in the score if you're looking for it. You'll find everything." The only exception is in Knock Knock Bach. There are a couple of tone rows that get shortened, um, but not many. Like only 3 or 4, and in very obvious ways.
So let's rewind a moment because I think I sort of interrupted you with my clarification of the tone row. So let's rewind a little bit. So you have these 12 notes divided into 4 groups of 3. Now,
Okay, they do not have to divide into 4 groups of 3. I do in this particular case, but you can split them into 2 hexachords, 2 of 6.
Got it.
You can use it just a straight 12. You can use 6 groups of 2. However you want to group it. There's no rule. There's no rule that says you must group it this way. The only rule is that you cannot repeat pitches until the whole tone row is sounded, and you can repeat as long as you go back. So for instance, we have B, B flat, D, right? So I can go B, B flat, 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 D, and then continue the row. So otherwise you get no repetition at all, which would be really hard to make a piece of music out of,
And just to clarify, Chris, you can have uneven division. So you could have so an even division would be like tetrachord, 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 but you could also do pentachord, pentachord, group of 2.
Correct. Absolutely correct.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I actually said one of the way I combine it with cribbage is based on number 15. So I built a spreadsheet of every permutation of 15 where every single one is an unique integer. So you have like 2, 3, 10, or you have 7, 8, or you have 6, 4, 5. And then, so a lot of the rhythmic stuff, I would just pick different ones. I go bada 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 bada, and then do the next one. So you get all these kind of cool syncopated rhythms by choosing different sets of integers.
So when you're looking at composing a piece, I think you were really onto something in terms of breaking down the explanation by saying you could go B, B flat, B, B flat, B, B flat, B, B flat, D. Now, after you play that D, that's our 3rd note in our first group of 3. Then what happens?
Then you can either go B, B flat, D and continue, or you can just continue
to the next group of 3.
I couldn't go B, B flat, D, D, B flat, D, and not do the B again. Does it make sense?
One more, maybe try breaking that one more time.
Sure, no problem. So I'll say B, B flat, B, B flat, B, B flat, D.
Yes.
I couldn't then go B, D. I have to have the B. I have to have the intervening notes.
Got it.
So if I rewind the row, a little bit, I still have to follow the order of the pitches in the row. I can't just start picking willy-nilly around the row. Does that make sense?
Yes, 100%. So you have to
stay in order.
Yeah, you have to go through a neighboring pitch within the row.
They have to stay in order, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So
I go back as far as I want. So I want to say I go all the way to the end, to the 10th pitch, let's say, and then go back to the top. But at some point I have to give you a complete row statement.
Gotcha.
And the pitches will stay in order. That's kind of the big thing, is the pitches stay in order.
So after you've sort of had your moment with the B, the B flat, and the D, at what point do you then move on to the E flat, G, and F sharp?
When you as a composer decided it's time to move on. Okay. That is your choice.
So you could have an entire first movement or first section of a piece just be those first 3. And you could look at it from a macro way of saying, over the entire course of everything I'm giving you, I'm going to show you the 12 notes. And you could also look at it as a micro, as in within each movement or within each part of a piece, you have to go through all 12 notes. Is that correct?
That's almost exactly how the 144,000 was composed. So you take the bottom corner of the matrix, and the right hand is going up, and the left hand is going left. But so you get B, 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 and then you start getting these pitches, and they're still in order, but they're from, it's a minimalist piece that grows out that way. Does it make sense? So you build different chords and how the two lines intersect, the 2 rows intersect.
And the 2 rows would be which 2 rows, Chris?
I believe it's the bottom corner, so it should be RI0 and oh gosh, I11, something like that. I'd
Okay.
look at it to be sure. I can send you the matrix, no problem.
I'd really appreciate it. We can include that in the show notes because I know I'm having a little bit of a rough time wrapping my head around it, and I'm sure some folks at home are too. And maybe looking over it would be super helpful.
Yeah, I
Um,
think so too.